If there's one thing we agree on, it's that Colorado's roads are in miserable shape. Yet our leaders seem no closer to a solution. Taxpayers learn just how much their town's million-dollar mess-up will really cost them. Next, viewers spotted something strange in a story last night. Oh, that is concerning. Perhaps we are missing the point with Senator Cory Gardner and impeachment. And what was it that disappeared? The drones or just the news coverage? That's next.
Colorado drivers demand better roads and less traffic. Colorado taxpayers will not pay for better roads and less traffic. That is what a TV newscast prone to cliches would call a crossroads. We will call it a lack of political will. Here's politics guy Marshall Zellinger.
Besides collecting potholes, Colorado also collected $3.4 billion in sales and use tax money from you last year. What does that have to do with potholes? A Republican state senator wants to fill them using some of that tax money by bringing back an old Colorado law.
About 10% of the sales tax we as a state collect is on vehicles, tires, batteries, things that are transportation related. That money should be going to transportation-related spending.
Republican Senator Paul Lundeen wants to divert what would have been $340 million last year to roads. But if this idea were to be in place, that $340 million would have to be cut from any of these areas that got general fund money from lawmakers last year.
The public option, incredibly expensive. Reinsurance, incredibly expensive. Family medical leave, incredibly expensive. All new ideas. Let's take care of the business we've been neglecting for decades, the roads and bridges, and then have a conversation about new ideas.
There's nothing wrong with the idea in general, except that sales tax right now is also being spent on things that are really important to Coloradans, like public education and providing health care for people who need it.
Democrats like Representative Matt Gray, who chairs the Transportation Committee, are willing to dip into the state's existing fund if they can also figure out a way to generate new money. But voters haven't been on their side. In 2018, Proposition 109 would have borrowed money for roads and not cost us any more. That failed. Proposition 110 would have raised the state sales tax for road funding. Failed. Proposition CC would have funded roads and schools with your Tabor refunds. Failed.
I think that we do need to ask ourselves whether what voters are telling us is keep sending us these things over and over again and don't fix the roads in the meantime, or are they saying, look, we hire you to do a job, go do your job and don't ask us to be the ones to do it for you.
You like this pothole thing? Because guess what? That 10% of sales tax idea failed today, as we expected it would, Kyle.
We go through this year after year after year, and at some point, is there some kind of compromise that's outside the lane of what we always talk about?
Compromise would be general fund money, like we just talked about, that Republicans would like that, but the Democrats like that word fees. So perhaps your Uber, your Lyft ride, some delivery service, there might be a fee on that. Your electric vehicle where you don't go to the gas pump, there might be a fee on that. There might also be an idea about raising the gas tax, but that would have to go to the voters, and we know how voters feel about that.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Marshall. It's pretty rare to see an entire town taken to the cleaners at once, but you know, Erie managed to do it. The town mistakenly paid the wrong person for a bridge, and scammers walked away with $1 million. But there's insurance for that, Erie insisted. Have you ever worked with insurance? Noel Brennan tells us how that went.
The Erie Parkway Bridge is getting more attention now.
Yeah, it looks well done.
Than it did on ribbon cutting day.
Yeah, I see the bridge from my house all the time, so the first few days I was just like shaking my head all the time, but...
Jemmy Dolma and those who pass over or under
I try not to think about it.
are reminded of the fact the town paid for this bridge twice.
They paid somebody and it wasn't the right person.
A scammer posing as a construction company convinced the town to send over $1 million in electronic payments to a fraudulent account.
It makes you want to laugh and cry at the same time.
I think every emotion right now is warranted and okay.
Mayor Jennifer Carroll had hoped the town's two insurance companies would cover the loss.
CIRSA provides up to $150,000 of coverage, and then AIG goes up to $2 million for crime-type events.
CIRSA cut a check for $150,000. AIG is offering $100,000.
We have a $2 million policy, and they're covering $100,000. That's just ridiculous in our minds.
If insurance won't cover the rest, the town effectively loses more than $850,000 of transportation funds.
We have no intent of going back to our taxpayers and asking for more money to cover the loss, but in the sense that now we can do less with what we have, yes, that's a negative impact to our taxpayers.
Hopefully a new bridge won't be a permanent reminder of old mistakes.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope they solve it.
For Next, I'm Noel Brennan.
AIG says it is still cooking up a statement for us on this. The town of Erie told us that AIG considered the claim to be impersonation fraud when it capped the compensation at $100,000. RTD is fighting state legislators who want more audits of how that transit agency spends money. And then last night, we heard an RTD official say this about their spending on the last CEO search.
Unfortunately, the way the search was done the last time, the money was taken from all over the place. And so there's really no good way to track all the expenses that were made.
That sounds like an invitation for an audit, right? RTD is opposing state legislators' efforts to force more transparency there. They say it's redundant and it's not needed. Imagine listening to people in various states of distress all day, every day. Welcome to the life of a 911 operator. They are now asking for help, mental health support. Now, their request has been denied before. Anusha Roy learned they came back with receipts this time.
Yeah, so today 911 operators were testifying at the Capitol about how some of the calls that they have heard are listening to people who have passed away while on the phone with them, or even heard officers getting shot. So what they're asking is to be able to use workers' comp to access more mental health help. But to do that, all that really needs to happen is just to add one single word to an already existing law. We're talking about the word audible. The law was passed in 2017. It was geared towards first responders who see this kind of trauma, not hear it. So one of the state lawmakers said today they just didn't think of it at the time. 911 dispatchers did, and then last year tried to make that change, but ended up getting turned down because they didn't have the data to back up their concern. So this year they came back with that research.
We've been able to produce the data that indicates that auditory exposure to these traumatic events is just as impactful as seeing it. So I think that was really incumbent upon us to make that case.
Anybody who works in the sort of legislative process knows that sometimes things take more than once to get through.
Now, lawmakers did pass the bill out of committee today, but with changes to make sure that the only people who hear this kind of trauma firsthand are covered by this law, but not someone who may have heard it secondhand, like through someone else's phone or conversation. So, Kyle, it's their way of trying to narrow it down of who could actually be benefiting from a law like this.
Wild that one word could make that difference. I mean, at the end of the day, though, I feel like we talk about this every day. It comes down to whether or not the state feels like they should be spending the money on this. What happens if they say no again?
Right. I mean, everybody's saying that there's still a gamble, right? They have to figure out if this law is going to pass. The Colorado Municipal League basically said there are some state grants that might be available for some dispatchers to tap in order to get some of the help that they may not be getting right now.
All right. Thank you, Nusha. Colorado's Republican Senator Cory Gardner is making it official, announcing publicly what we told you first thing last night, that he's opposed to witnesses and new evidence in President Trump's impeachment trial. Colorado's Democratic Senator Michael Bennet said again this afternoon he believes that, quote, a vote against witnesses is a vote against the American people and our democracy. Now, you have fairly asked us why we focus more on Gardner than on Bennet in the impeachment debate. A couple of reasons. Gardner's up for re-election in 2020, and he's up for re-election in our state, which has been trending more toward Democrats. And Gardner directly ran on standing up to his party. But neither of our political experts were at all surprised that Gardner is taking President Trump's side on witnesses. Senator Gardner's emerged as one of President Trump's most loyal defenders, but does that really change his re-election chances?
I don't think so. In a state like Colorado that I think could go for a moderate, frankly, from either side of the aisle, he's boxing himself in going lockstep with the administration. So unfortunately, I think it damages his chances for re-election in Colorado.
Does this change anybody's mind about Cory Gardner?
I mean, look, number one, Cory Gardner needs to ensure that he keeps Republicans on his side of the aisle, A, and B, I think it really depends on who the Democrat nominee is. If it's Bernie Sanders, it's a whole new game.
I hear from Next viewers all the time who say that we are wrong to frame his decision-making through the lens of re-election. I constantly hear from people who say he knows that he's lost and he's just worried about what job he's going to get after the Senate. Is that fair?
I do think it's fair. I think the numbers would show that against a Democrat, fill in the blank, Gardner has limited chances when he's tied so strongly to Trump in a state that Trump did not win 4 years ago.
Again, I think it really depends on who the nominee is. We're in a totally different world if it's Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders versus a Joe Biden.
Appreciate the quick answers to quick questions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
An unmistakable voice gone from Colorado's airwaves.
It's the kind of voice that if you heard even in the distance in the supermarket, you'd be like, that's Bob Lafley.
And a viewer wants to know what happens to all the livestock auctioned off at the stock show. Are you going to tell her or should I? Next.
Cloudy and cooler today. Many of you saw a light dusting of snow, and there's the chance for a little additional snowfall yet tonight. Progressive pattern with another wave coming our way tomorrow, and then a big warm up just in time for the first weekend in February, where temperatures could come close to 70 degrees. But it's cold out there right now, and this first wave is dropping south. The next one will cruise over the northern mountains tomorrow. Not enough snow that we have advisories for snow or travel on I-70, but just know you will be driving on snow showers overnight tonight and early tomorrow. And this batch of snow showers coming south out of Fort Collins will actually move through the metro area between now and 9 o'clock. Skies will clear overnight with dry air working in. Nice day tomorrow, a little warmer, and the northern mountains again about 1 to 3 inches of snow. 20% chance that we'll see some of that moisture here in Denver. Tonight, snow showers early and then clearing under partly cloudy skies, our low 23. Tomorrow, sunshine early, 46, and then an afternoon snow shower. Then look at this. We've got 50s with sunshine Friday, 60s on Saturday, close to 70 on Sunday, and we have a chance for snow, maybe accumulating snow Monday into Tuesday, with cold highs in the 20s on Tuesday and lows in the singles and teens.
We still get questions about the mystery drone seen over northeastern Colorado, even since they dropped out of the headlines. Marty and Patricia were among those who recently wrote into Next wondering why the drones, or at least the drone story, vanished.
Marty, Patricia, I wish I had a better answer for you. Here's what we can say definitively. Reports of unidentified object spottings in the sky, they have dropped off significantly. Now, why is that? Is that because there really was something there in the first place and then it left the area? Or is it because state investigators determined a good number of those drone reports were actually people just looking at stars and airplanes, and then people got embarrassed to cry drone? As quickly as those still unidentified objects appeared over small towns on the plains, they disappeared. We talked to Morgan County Dave Martin today, Morgan County Sheriff Dave Martin, and he says they haven't received a single drone report in a week. Tonight on Presented Without Comment, a viewer asks what happens to the animals sold at the livestock auction at the National Western Stock Show.
There are voices in the news business that those of us without a great voice, frankly, covet.
Bob Lafley's voice, that's the voice I want.
Today we remember a familiar presence on Colorado radio. And I'm telling you a story last night, and everybody emails in, "Don't you see it?" Next.
We are getting some feedback, quite a bit of it actually, because last night I was talking about Arapahoe County's halfway house for women that's almost full, and a bunch of you were only halfway paying attention because you had noticed the random vehicle flipped on its roof at the top of the screen. We went back and looked, and sure enough, there were a couple of cars in our Sky 9 video that appear to be in some distress. So here's the deal. We made some calls, and it turns out that South Metro Fire has a training center that is right next door to the halfway house, and they use those cars for practicing various rescues. The vehicles are donated to the department or they're purchased from salvage yards, and they set them up like that on their sides or their tops so that Denver firefighters, who also use that center, can come in and practice. By the way, we learned that that center is named the Troy Jackson Training Center in honor of the department's assistant chief who passed away last month. We've done a number of stories here about Troy Jackson's long work to fight the cancers that affect firefighters. For more than 50 years, Bob Lafley had conversations with Coloradans over the radio. Yesterday, he succumbed to his battle with cancer. Today, one of his colleagues remembered his radio inspiration and friend.
PC out. I am pulling up archive audio of Bob Lafley.
Traffic is now being allowed through Glenwood Canyon.
He was a news host, he was a classical host, so there's a lot to choose from.
Hi, I'm Bob Lafley, music host for CPR Classical.
Bob Lafley's voice, that's the voice I want. That's the voice you should have if you're in radio. I'm Ryan Warner, the senior host of Colorado Matters on Colorado Public Radio. We're talking about Bob Lafley, a longtime news and classical host at Colorado Public Radio who died at age 74 this week of cancer. You know, I think we wonder whether people on air are the same off air. Bob was. We've lost a friend. We've lost someone who was really kind to us. But we've also lost his reservoir of knowledge. I mean, he knew a ton about classical music, a ton about all genres of music. And because he'd reported on Colorado for so long as a news person, you lose that history, you lose that knowledge and that brain trust. I'm not sure if I'm going to miss his voice more coming at me over my radio, because that was always so comforting, or if I'm going to miss the voice in the hallway that I would pass and stop and have a heart-to-heart with. I think it's really hard to choose what will be the larger ache.
CPR's Bob Lafley.
Well, thanks a lot, Bob. Thank you. For KCFR, this is Bob Lafley. Thank you.
This program has been the medium for a discussion about medium this week. We got talking about how nobody uses the term of moderation anymore. Everything's big or small. The jumping off point was that viral tweet from the San Miguel County Sheriff's Office. They described a large boulder the size of a small boulder blocking the road. The woman who wrote that tweet, the sheriff's spokeswoman Susan Lilly, wanted to have a word about the word medium.
I am not going to use the word medium. I don't know. It's just kind of boring and mediocre. I like Biggie Smalls. Notoriously Biggie Smalls.
Biggie Smalls, The Rock. Medium amount of feedback tonight. Rich Greger writes in about the scam up in Erie. How'd the scammer know that the construction company was owed $1 million? That's a great question, Rich, but the town insists the investigators looked at it and decided that it was not an inside job. Lana wants to know why RTD is hiring an interim manager and whether that's a lot of wasted time and money. Lana, I don't get the sense that they spent a lot of time or money on the search for the interim manager. It's the search for the long-term manager that could turn into, well, a more expensive proposition. We told you here last night they were thinking about spending $400,000. They decided to cut that to $200,000. See you next time.